Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning, Tom. Welcome to spring. This is our In Like a Lion meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody out there in TV land as well to the March 7, 2025 meeting of the Economic Development Commission. We'll start with the approval of the draft minutes of the February 7th meeting, which was sent out about 2 weeks ago, I think.
Move to accept.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any comments or corrections or anything?
There's just a couple small ones I noticed. The second bullet point, Commissioner Samachi nominated Sarah. The nominated is missing.
Oh, are you looking at the January, Andy?
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are Feb.
We,
Oh, I'm on the wrong one.
yep.
You did that last month, and I fixed it.
Never mind.
I withdraw my comments.
Okay. Would anybody else like to venture into this territory? Okay, hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. By the way, we have no one on
We do not.
Zoom. Okay. All right, so next item on the agenda is Sean's report.
Okay. Good morning. So a couple of things citywide. I brought a rack card from the Arts and Cultural Commission, just to let you know. We had these printed up. The group is really focused on letting folks know what they're doing, what their focus is, and if you, on the backside, it talks about their areas of focus. So really just wanted this group to have a feel for that and look for any type of connections, or if you want to learn more about them. They're a very energized group. Secondly, there was the advisory group for the Market Square Master Plan meeting was held. Both Ann and I were there. Everett was not. But just in terms of process, the consultant, there was a lot of questions very specific on some of the things that they had proposed, and they shared a PowerPoint and got a lot of feedback from the group. Based on that, they're going to update this PowerPoint, and I think that might be the final presentation that'll be sent to City Council. I think that's the plan so far. So
That's what I took from it. There was a lot of feedback on parking on Congress Street. I felt like
yeah,
it got stuck in that category for a really long
Stuck in
time.
parking in Portsmouth?
yeah.
Well, specifically Congress
But
Street.
we got very granular in terms of these are the different scenarios, and then a lot of conversation around the different scenarios of parallel parking versus angle-in parking versus sidewalks versus things of that nature. So
Just so, are they finished with the general public hearings?
I believe so.
I think so.
The public input session.
Public input, for
input,
sure, yes, yes.
So it will be presented to the city council and members of the
Yeah,
public
I
can
asked
comment.
Peter midweek. He said they're making revisions based on the feedback they got in the, whatever that group's called,
The
the
advisory group.
advisory group. And then it would go to council.
I think
And then it lives as a document somewhere, I believe.
As we have done with the Climate Action Plan, the Community Health Plan, and the Cultural Plan, we will share the final draft with the council and the public and give it a meeting, a council meeting or two for people to provide comment, and then we will come back for acceptance.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Lastly, there's a meeting on Monday night, I think the final public meeting for the bike ped plan.
Correct.
That is
6:30.
6:30 at the City Council chambers.
Yep.
So that's your last opportunity if you are a bike ped plan person. Okay?
All right.
All right, moving on. So I attended a webinar on tariffs on Canadian goods yesterday. Still trying to process everything I heard, but the quick takeaways were a lot of things we probably already know. There's potential for increased cost at the gas pump, increased cost of goods, increased cost of materials for manufacturers, and increased energy costs. So cuts across consumers, businesses, but the word of the day is uncertainty. So the message we always hear is businesses don't like uncertainty. So I don't come here with any facts. I just sat through an hour-long meeting with some folks from Canada. It was the New England Canada Business Association, which I joined just to kind of keep in tune with some of those things. So, yeah.
Do you have any thought about Canadian tourists
Yeah.
and their interest in coming here?
Yeah, there's a problem. There's a problem in Portsmouth, there's a problem in the east coast of Maine, there's a problem in Hampton. Absolutely.
Hampton Beach
probably-
is heavy Canadian tourists.
Yeah. The Canadian consumers are speaking very loudly about that.
They've considered pulling American-made alcohol off their shelves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've done that.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty ugly right now.
So, before you jump to the next one,
Yeah.
was there any discussion about, filling in for things like high natural gas and that type of stuff, or?
Feeling,
Assuming, I know it keeps getting put off for 30-day increments, but if at some point the tariffs go into effect and the prices start really jumping, was there any discussion at your conference as to what alternatives will be available?
no.
So it's basically just a wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, these things don't turn on a dime. I mean, if you look at petroleum, maybe it's a global market. Will be right. So it'll move from a direct importation from Canada to something different, more on the world market.
All right, well,
Yeah, and again,
So if
these
we're-
folks didn't have a lot of answers.
Yeah,
They were
no,
just,
I just,
they're-
it sounds like everything we're hearing on the news, so I'm just wondering if the people have started to formulate contingency plans for any of this.
Yeah, 34 states in the country. Canada is their largest trading partner, so we are certainly not alone. But the other thing that came up was I heard yesterday was that Canada is the second leading investor in the United States for foreign direct investment, FDI, just second only behind Japan, and that's about $800 billion a year. I'm looking at my banker friends, but so. A lot of potential impact. Okay, moving on. If I so a quick update on. So I've been going to Propeller Club meetings, and the Propeller Club is looking to launch an economic impact study for the businesses, the maritime businesses up along the river. Some of you may recall the last one was done in 2012, in terms of replacing the Sarah Mildred Long Bridge. So we've dusted that off. They've dusted it off, and we're reaching out to UNH, who was involved in the last one. But I'll keep this group appraised of it. It's bigger than Portsmouth, but it certainly has a major impact on us. And the goal is to understand what the economic impact is, and then to use that for advocacy and support for the maritime industries. So more to come on that. I think I mentioned the last meeting the gentleman who wants to bring a tall ship to Portsmouth for the summer. I spoke to him the other day. There's not a lot of public options, but he's like, hey, I'll cut a deal with someone privately if there's a private dock, and I can work something out with them. So I throw this out to this group. If anybody knows of a private dock.
The big private dock.
Yeah.
What's the length?
82-foot schooner. I mean, I think there's a couple of places I could do it. He mentioned he had a partnership in another place with a restaurant where they let him park all summer, and they just worked out an agreement. So he's very flexible. He also went to Providence and came away empty. So I think he's more motivated to do whatever it takes to find a summer home, and I think that would be good for us. So I'll keep you posted on that. If you have any thoughts, please reach out to me. Just a quick update on Coast. So Coast is having a challenge, right? There's challenges at the federal level. Public transportation got zeroed out in the governor's budget. So there's hearings to try to reinstate some funding for Coast. The reason I bring this up is because they are planning a Learn and Engage event in Portsmouth. It's looking like, save the date, Tuesday, April 23rd, end of the day. They've done this in other communities around the seacoast. They really want to engage the business community. I mean, they already work with municipalities. They work with Portsmouth and others. But they feel like there's an opportunity to learn to engage the business community, potentially in some funding, because they need to expand how they do what they do. Okay? That is what I have this morning, Tom, from my
Okay.
office.
Great. Any other questions of Sean?
I have a random question. This just happened to come across my Facebook feed that there's the Regional Economic Development Center of Southern New Hampshire is hosting visioning sessions to help shape a 5-year plan for southeastern New Hampshire. Are we engaged or involved or partnered in that in any way?
I went last night.
Is that what you just said?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was like, wait, did I miss it? Great. How was it and what?
It was good. There were 4 areas of focus. It was housing, infrastructure, transportation, and kind of the people side of issues of aging in place is what they called it. So there was a whole breakout groups and capturing a lot of information. They're doing this 3 or 4 of these visioning sessions. Ben was there. I was there. There were some other chamber members and the RADC. So we're pretty dialed in, and we get that information. It comes into the planning group. It comes into my office. A lot of that stuff, Jen, is infrastructure, big infrastructure projects that cut across communities. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Thank you.
Is that group looking at the transportation issue, the coast issue, and that type of thing?
Yes. They are. So they're much further south. I mean, they come up here, but we're like the northern fringe of it. They would love to have coast down in Hampton and Seabrook and other places, but coast is not able to get there yet.
Okay, so they don't have that, okay.
Right.
All right.
Is the aging in place a reflection of current demographics and demographic trends where we have to consider the aging of the current population as opposed to bringing in younger workforce, which has been a constant conversation?
Yes, and I think it was an offshoot of the housing issue. How do we create more various housing options versus everybody competing for the same ones, right? Because people don't want to leave, and people do want to come to the area.
If I may, this is what I used to do in my previous job. The idea would be allocate resources that may exist at the local, state, or federal level to allocate to folks who could then make the necessary retrofits to their home to stay where they are. A lot of it is based on that.
Okay.
Okay, anything else, or?
That's it for me.
All right.
You're Ben as well, right?
Yes, I
Now
am.
you can do Ben.
Okay, from the chamber, the chamber held the well-attended economic outlook event on February 19th, and I think we talked about that last month. It went very well, I think. Yeah. So next up is the State of the City coming in the near future in May. Great. The chamber also had they've launched the Celebrate Her educational series. The first session occurred, it was yesterday. Upcoming dates are April 3rd, May 8th, and the theme of these sessions is mentorship. Local law, the downtown shopping night, third Thursday of each month, so that's happening on March 20th. And the retailers, they're gaining some momentum. They're actually now looking to collaborate on, if you buy something in a local store, you get entered in to a raffle for a couple of prizes. So I think they feel good. They understand it was slow January, February, but they're really excited about maintaining local law going into the spring. Spring Chamber educational series include creating, optimizing, and streamlining your business with AI, how to launch and leverage a business podcast, Access Navigator education and service opportunity, and then Ready to Serve, preparing for nonprofit leadership. So I think the Chamber Education Series kind of ebbs and flows, but I feel like they're ramping up again this year. Ben would kill me if I didn't remind you that Restaurant Week is April 10th through the 19th. 35 restaurants are participating. And I think you've heard Ben talk about he's trying to tee up a music festival for March of 2026, so a year from now. But just another way to kind of extend or maybe jumpstart the season of visitors. And tonight is Art Round Town. And that's the Chamber report.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, you got a lot. What kind of music is he talking about?
I don't know. I don't know.
I feel like back in the day we used to have a lot with, well, was Cisco and Red Hook. I feel like towards the end of like Red Hook's tenure, there were like bigger. There was like a New England Country Festival, the New England Bluegrass, but like there were bigger festivals there.
That's true.
Yeah, they were great.
I think the idea is to get a particular weekend and maybe a long weekend, and then be able to promote that ahead of time and just, get folks here sooner, despite the weather
Yeah.
that we have in March.
Well, days past, a lot of days past, there were a lot of street festivals in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
How are they going to do it?
I think he's looking at multiple venues.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that way to,
All over
to
town.
kind of create all over town, all at once to
Yeah.
bring that critical
Yeah.
mass. That's the concept.
Well, I think, Tom, to what you just said, that there used to be more street festivals. I know in the master plan, refresh committee, that's been a conversation of, changing flow and traffic, of being able to do more mini street closures and like more engagement with community organizations and mini festivals or things like that, to try to bring those, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like, we used to have a lot more.
Let's bring back the Blues Festival.
Yeah.
I would add that out around town tonight, there's an opening at the Athenaeum of an exhibit of lunch in Portsmouth, and it's hard to find lunch in Portsmouth now. I mean, but it used to be that people went to lunch in Portsmouth a lot. I mean, all the workers would go to lunch, and so it's an exhibit of lunch boxes and the lunch counters, like the Victory and the ones at Pick and Pay, and at J.J. Newberry's. They're very popular, and so it's an interesting exhibit.
The Captain's Table. Remember that?
I know.
Actually, not to anticipate the master planning process, but, with the loss of downtown offices, it's really the lunch businesses that are
That are hurting.
getting squeezed. That's why you don't have lunches, not just the workers, but you don't have the customers on Monday, Tuesdays, that type of thing.
Everyone works through lunch now. There's
Yeah.
no lunch breaks.
Or remotes.
Tell my staff that.
Okay. Well, that was a nice segue into the city council report. I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So I'll start off with, I feel like has been a little bit the most confusing item that came out, which was the waiving of fees for tables and chairs for, I'm not going to call it outdoor dining, because it is for the encumbrance permits. So these are the open space, not fenced-in tables and chairs. Historically, the city has charged $75 a chair, $75 an A-frame, $75 a table, $10 a chair. And I was trying to make this clear at our meeting that these are very different than our outdoor dining fenced-in areas. And these can be used year-round. There was a recommendation from the fee committee to waive all fees for these because of public realm interest. I would say that this really came forward last year with Mark McNabb's request to waive fees for Hearth. I will say that I was adamantly against it. I did abstain from the vote, but it did pass 5-2. But I know that there was, in social media and kind of in the public, there was a confusion of whether this was waiving of outdoor dining fees. This is a whole separate encumbrance. So that vote did pass. I know that this committee did, recommend to the council to recoup fees, or like the cost of actual doing the business, doing the permitting, doing all of that. But it was the will of a majority of the council to waive those. Myself, not in that.
I would add to that, they still have to have a permit.
Correct.
Yes, you still will go through the encumbrance process, the encumbrance permit process. You still have to have your insurance, do all of that stuff. So these are a good example, are like the tables outside of Ceres Street. The 3 tables, 6 chairs, or outside of.
The works.
The Politana. What traditionally we saw as those tables outside of what was Breaking New Grounds. Again, everything that's not in a fence that the public can just sit in. So any benches, anything like that, those fees are waived.
What's the total amount of
We don't know the complete, because we don't have a breakdown between the encumbrance of, say, A-frames or clothing racks or things like that. In last year, I believe the total fees collected for encumbrance for this type of encumbrance was like $8,700.
Like that.
It's not a lot of money.
No, it's not a lot of money. Couple thousand, yes. My biggest concern was something that we talk about quite often is just the slow erosion of fees and the slow erosion of any type of revenue from the budget, then gets downshifted to our tax base. So, anyhow, what else? We voted to approve the payment in lieu table. It's recommended by the Housing Committee. So this is that conversation we've had a lot, which is if we are looking to get workforce units built, but a developer does not want to build them, we now have, based on our consultant RKG, who did a big housing study for workforce and below market rate housing a couple years ago, they gave us a plan, a recommendation based on cost per unit build, kind of what we could say to a builder: hey, you don't want to build these? Okay. Well, now you have to pay us instead. That money would go directly into the Affordable Housing Trust, which has been reestablished. And so that went through. That's been worked on for the last 6 months in the Housing Committee. What else? A big thing for, I think, businesses and people to know is that we are trying a delayed opening for the customer service, customer front-facing departments, level 2, over to the right, on Wednesdays. Wednesdays for this month, doing a pilot program. You know, those people, those amazing staff members, from the clerk to the tax assessor to car registration and so on, are always facing the public. So sometimes, as we know, they can't get their we'll call it the back of the house in the restaurant world, back of the house stuff done. So we're piloting a program that's very common in other municipalities. What else? Of course, the school budget conversation was a big conversation at the meeting with the potential tax cap or recommendation of guide. The council set forward to the charter commissions and also to general government to try to stay within a 2.9 recommendation for budget increase. That was potentially, and I want to make this very clear to everyone in this room and anyone who watches this, the city council did not ask for staff reduction. That has kind of been put out there as a little bit of a narrative that we said you need to cut positions to kind of that gap. That was never my intention, and I think I speak for the council that was never their intention. We're looking for everyone to bring creative solutions to our ever-growing budget. But within conversations of that, there were conversations of it looks like it would have been up to 15 potential positions. So we're working with the school board. The school board just released their public budget this past Tuesday. So again, we're in budget season, as it always is. It's stressful for everyone, and we're trying to make sure that the residents of Portsmouth get the services they're used to with an ever-increasing cost burden of that. Is there anything that Vince, you feel?
I would just say that the Carl Austin salt pile painting was donated.
Oh, yes.
And will be hanging.
It is hung
It is
It's hot.
in the hallway outside.
We're all like, where?
Photograph, right?
Yes.
Photograph, yes. And it's
Actually taken in the
beautiful.
80s.
1990.
1990.
It says on the back of it, yeah.
Yeah,
But he started
1990.
doing those things in the 80s.
Yes, and it's really great. He has a huge 8x10 like vintage slide camera. It's a pretty, as someone who does a lot of like film photography, it's pretty miraculous. The amount of detail, the contrast is super talented. I feel like
I had a couple things.
Yes, I was going to just talk about the ordinance changes, but yes.
Outdoor dining is open for those restaurants that wish to start the permitting process, and in the first week, we already have a good handful, so that's encouraging. And in the most anticlimactic way possible, we announced at the February 18th meeting the dismissal of the McIntyre lawsuit.
Yep,
So
I was just
that
about to
issue
say.
has come to a peaceful resolution.
And what's really exciting is that part of that settlement is the first initial funding of our housing trust of
And I can tell you the check was received this week.
half a mil.
Oh, wow.
So
Permanently below market housing trust.
Permanently below market housing trust, we'll call it.
Great.
That's great. Any questions of Joanna?
Our guests are in the hall, so I'll go get them.
Anything you want to add to that, Vince?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. All right, still lots going on. All right, so I know I saw Rick Chelman, who is the chair of the planning board. Here's Rick, and there's Peter. Okay, good.
So that photograph is, as you go out the door, just look down the hall and you'll see it. And then as you walk towards it, it's awesome because it comes into, it's really cool. It's awesome, yeah.
It is, yeah.
It was donated.
I shoot like essentially like a 4x4, like I have a 120.
You did a good job of holding it up.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really.
I wanted somebody to technical.
Yeah.
Weirdest thing looking through the.
Oh yeah. So it is crazy. And so mine is very old and like kind of wonky. So I do a lot of what I do. I had to take it apart last year and really deep clean it. But I go. There's a place in Atkinson where I go and they have a dark room you can rent by the hour. Yeah, it's super inexpensive, so I go there. But I'm really bad at Screwflex because I haven't really figured out how much to turn it to forward the film because it doesn't tell you.
What are you doing here?
And so I end up
make everybody
now
take one
just
guess.
double exposure.
You're at the
Can't really
Clipper Bar?
tell where, at least on mine, like it's not an up and down, it's a forward progression of the roll. I haven't spent enough, this film's so expensive. I haven't spent like practicing exactly where I'm dialed the next.
These are good seats. Yeah.
How do you pronounce your name?
Kumachi. It was you were so close. You were so close. No one gets it. Yeah, you can just
Jen.
Yeah, scooch.
That's right, they'll just scan and upload.
You want to switch seats with me?
But yeah, this
And you can run this?
I pitched but because she does.
You want to switch with me?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, well, I'm going to buy you the higher grade film. I want my negatives.
That's
So I'm going next
why
season
not?
to try to print some of our like black and white photos. I was like, I want people to print some of my own.
Yeah.
But I shoot a lot of like Nikon. I have an amazing D3 that I love. It also has the viewfinder. So yeah, you take it off. You take off the top part. Yep. And it has the viewfinder. That one's pretty hardy and that's why I travel a lot. You could just put in those. Would you rather see the agency? And I just
Ahead in the spring?
I started doing.
So I will.
Let's go, Jones stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Where'd you go, Dark? What
Get
happened?
people excited to be exiting winter.
So I've rebuilt. Like,
Okay, if I could get your attention again,
I'll travel.
There's limited
Hello?
options here for that for sure.
and Bob. Bob,
Yes?
can I have your attention?
Oh, sure.
Ann had me
Yeah, it's Ann's fault.
Ann's talking in class again.
All right, so I would like to welcome our two guests today, Rick Chelman, who is the chair of the planning board, and Peter Stith, who is the planning manager in the Planning and Sustainability Department. And as you know, they're going to talk to us about the soon-to-commence master planning process, although some of it has already started to happen behind the scenes, like selecting the consultant. But I've already met with Rick and discussed at length the desire of the EDC to become involved in that process, particularly as it relates to economic development issues. I hope when we come out today, we will have an understanding of how we can best play a role in that and support their efforts. As you know, statutorily, it's the planning board who has the responsibility for developing a master plan in the municipality. That doesn't mean that there aren't other boards, commissions, or public input as part of that process. So with that, I'll turn it over. I guess you want to lead us in or introduce?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So as Tom said, he and I met
couple weeks ago, had a nice long discussion about this. I thought we would have more of an informal discussion, but then he sent me an email with a whole bunch of questions and looking forward to a presentation. So he did what the chair does sometimes and sort of structured things more than I had thought. I don't know how much you folks are familiar with the master plan process in New Hampshire. As Tom mentioned, it's a statutory requirement in order to have things like zoning and capital improvement plans and site plan regulations, subdivision regulations, all of that. You have to have a master plan as sort of the constitution by which these things are guided. And we have one. It is a process. It's also something that needs to be updated on a regular basis. There's no requirement. You have to do it every year, 5 years, 10 years. There's this understanding or belief that, well, master plans are good for 5 years or they're good for 10 years. Well, it depends on the community. And a dynamic place like Portsmouth that's changing hourly, it seems at times. Sometimes we have to look more regularly. But it's certainly time, based on what we've seen at the planning board, what we've been working with staff. There's just so much that's happened in the city in the last 10 years, even the last 5 years. It's time to do that. So one of the things that sort of tickled me with the change since the last master plan was done, I literally spent a minute and a half with an AI request, show me a presentation on how to do a land use master plan process in New Hampshire. That's what this is. This is a 2-minute presentation. I'm not going to read everything because I figure folks can do that, but I'll try to explain it and just kind of flip through these slides. And it is what I explained, and as you can see in these different images as we come through. One of the things that's important and picks up on what Tom said, the statutes in New Hampshire are mostly geared towards the many towns that we have. There's hundreds and hundreds of towns in the state of New Hampshire and very few cities. So I used to be on the planning board and also on the Board of Selectmen in Tuftonboro years ago. A little small town, 3,000 people on Lake Winnipesaukee. Has a planning board, board of adjustment, has all the standard land use boards that we have here. That has no staff. It deals with issues much, much different than we deal with here in Portsmouth, like islands in Lake Winnipesaukee. There's a whole bunch of those. We don't have those. But the complexities of a city and the complexities of Portsmouth just eclipse a place like Tuftonboro. But despite that, the statutory framework is really geared around that town format. So as Tom said, even though it is the planning board by statute that runs the master plan process, in a place like Portsmouth, we have to engage with the other land use boards, with the council, obviously, with staff, of course, to get these things advanced. Now, I won't zoom into some of these images. This was funny. Many of these images have nothing to do with New Hampshire. Some of the slides are in Spanish, which is fine. If you want to look up RSA 674, that is where the framework begins on how to set up a master plan. There's only, I think, 2 sections that are required. You have to have a land use section, you have to have a vision section. And other than that, it's all optional. So we have more than that in the existing master plan, and we'll probably have some added chapters that deal with things like climate change, sea level change, other things that are more specific to Portsmouth. We have more historic resources than many communities, and this is a big one. Our zoning ordinance, I'm trying to think how to say this, it's difficult to understand. I get paid to do zoning applications on a regular basis and write zoning ordinances. Ours is very comprehensive, and it's too difficult. You shouldn't have to hire me to tell you what you can do on your property, or a person like me. You shouldn't have to hire Tom. You shouldn't need a team of experts to tell you what you can do on your property. And ours, unfortunately, because it is so complex, requires that. So one of the things we'll be talking with the consultant about is what do they see, where do they see changes that can...
We have a generator.
Apparently there
It's not a zero-day event, okay. So this is something we will be looking at. There is a, I don't know how many of you are familiar with our zoning ordinance. You probably avoided it if you can, but it's based on what's called a form-based code, and that is a more recent way of doing zoning where you're looking at more the physical form of how land uses will be shaped with the buildings and other improvements on a site, as opposed to the historic zoning, which was just about uses. You know, it started with things that were noxious, not being near residential uses, which is a good idea. You don't want the tanning plant next to the nursery school. We've gotten a little bit away from that with much more clean, you know, so many other environmental regulations, you don't have that sort of a situation happening on a regular basis. So it's more form-based code. The environmental things I mentioned, that's a huge part of establishing the framework. The master plan won't say do this specifically. It will say guard these resources, protect the wetlands, look at the saltwater marshes, that sort of thing. And we have pretty good protections already in that regard. So the way it works, the consultants will do this. They have to gather, like what's happened in the last 5-10 years since the last master plan. We've got a whole bunch of approved projects that have yet to be constructed. We need to know quantitatively how many units are sort of in the pipeline, if you will. What's the actual capacity that's at our sewage treatment plant, the water supply systems, these sorts of things. Conversations with fire and police, you know, public safety capacities adequate. We know the police need a better station facility. That's a separate conversation, but that's a conversation that would be a part of a master plan discussion. This one is huge, and this will be, in my view, hopefully probably the most expensive part, or nearly the most expensive part of the process. It's getting the people engaged, and this is where I think the EDC might be able to help. One of the many ways you might be able to help. It's important to get what the real, you know, what Portsmouth today is in terms of input into a master plan process. The classic way of getting input would have people coming to planning board meetings and have Peter and I set up a chair and a table with some, you know, jot your comments down here or put some Post-its on a board. That works to a certain degree, but you don't get the engagement of people that don't come to meetings like that. They don't come to places like this. I have a video that I probably won't show, but Boulder, Colorado was updating their comprehensive plan, which is what they call it out there. And it's a cute video critiquing the classic method, showing what I just described as the guy setting up the table, and then the camera pans back and it's on a mountaintop all by itself with an eagle screaming in the background, you know, no people around. And unfortunately, it's like the usual suspects that show up at meetings. And we want more, you know, young people, older people. It's just a whole mix. You know, Portsmouth, the demographics have been changing. So this requires work to get that outreach and to get that engagement. So it'll take neighborhood meetings and feedback loops so people can see they've been heard with what they said. It's not just, you know, saying, oh yeah, thanks for showing up. You know, we have to show that we actually heard what they were saying. Then this is the iterative process. These two should be going back and forth. Public engagement, show you what, you know, what we had for ideas, so that people can see again that what they were thinking either has been incorporated or it was rejected because of other reasons that they may not have been aware of. The adoption process, it's technically the planning board adopts it, but obviously it'll have to go to council for the council's review. It's not a legal requirement the council adopt it, but I'm sure they will, or they won't. They'll send it back if they don't like it. And then ongoing, you just have to keep an eye on things with these performance indicators and other things that get embedded into a master plan that help inform how more frequently do you need to update it. You know, is this a there might be sections, and you can do this in pieces. There may be sections that need to be updated annually or even more often, depending on what's going on in the city. So those, I just threw those in there. That was my additional 45 seconds. Those are Tom's questions. So the contract, the negotiations are nearing completion. I talked with Peter Britz and Peter Smith yesterday. If you want to give an update, Peter,
Yeah,
we're
sure.
getting close.
I mean, and I can say who it is, right?
Sure.
We're contracting with UTL out of Boston, and we've been finalizing the contract, hoping to get that finalized in the next couple weeks, and so that they can kick off, hopefully, the end of this month to start going. And we're excited. They have some good ideas, but like Rick mentioned, we're really pushing the public engagement portion of this process, trying to get some different types of engagement than traditional, you would think.
Can I jump in
Yep.
here for those that aren't privy to the backstory? We had 4 very solid proposals, which felt good to the review team. And any of the 4 or elements of the 4 would have been good, but we had unanimous consensus around picking UTILE for a variety of reasons. So strong team. Rich,
UTILE.
I'm familiar with them from 100 years ago back in where I worked, and I think they're going to be really user-friendly. Well, we're just working out the scope right now. And I think for those of you who participated in some of the feedback garnered by the master plan, the Market Square master plan folks with Beta Group, I think some of those techniques, as well as others, will be used.
Right. They've built some of that almost identical to the Market Square Master Plan outreach into it, which is good. But there needs to be some additional, in my opinion, phone-based input and other things, online presence. So that'll be a discussion with the consultant. And several of Tom's questions actually will involve questions with the consultant. So I'm not going to read them all. This will start as soon as the contract is signed. It could start this month. It could start next month. It's going to start really soon. It's going to take into next year to get this work done. We'll just have to see how the process goes, what sort of feedback we get, how the UTIL is a fairly large firm. They're doing a whole bunch of other projects, so it's partly dependent on their workload as well. So we'll have to see, how this works and how they're working with us. The client-consultant arrangement makes a difference in production speed as well. The process, that's still being decided and will be part of initial discussions with UTIL. They're looking to have a community outreach person, and in certain communities where I've worked on master plans, boy, when you find the right person like that, and there are consultants who do that work, it's amazing. I don't know a person like that or a firm like that in Portsmouth. If you do, please let us know. Preferably not somebody with a lightning rod attached to their hat, because we get a few of those in the city. I've seen, like I say, we did a couple of different master plan processes out in Illinois, and there were a couple of local firms that were just fantastic with helping with that. The type of person that can get the mayor's attention, get my attention, get your attention in a nice way. But you better show up if they're knocking on your door and sending you emails and that sort of thing. They're persistent. So any thoughts in that regard would be greatly appreciated.
If I just follow up on the community organizer, that's going to be a paid position. They're going to contract with UTIL. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's going to be a paid position for them to do this community organizing. So, yeah, we would love to, if you have any suggestions, we've been trying to reach out to find the perfect person, but
But you envision that person being a local resident?
Certainly local connections. Like the firms I worked with out in the St. Louis area, they're fantastic, but they don't know Portsmouth. And part of what a firm like that brings is their local knowledge. That particular crew actually goes all the way up to state level government. So you need a meeting with the governor, yeah, they'll make it happen. So but that's there. And I don't know of an organization like that around here, but, you know, you may. One thing that ties into this also is how many planning board members are willing to devote the extra time it'll take to do the normal stuff that we do as a planning board, plus all this additional work on the master plan. I think there are several members who are interested and excited to help, but we haven't had that full conversation yet. So that's happening. I've got informal buy-in, if you will, from a few members, but when they see it might mean an extra 1 or 2 or 3 meetings a month, buy-in may fall off a little bit. We'll see. We'll see what happens. The other city boards, commissions, departments, and everything like that, that's going to be dependent on discussions with staff and UTL. We've got to make sure it's working with their system. UTL's done several master plans. They did Nashua. They recently finished. Did they finish Chelsea? Or are they working on Chelsea?
I think they're still working.
I think they're still working.
But they've done a whole bunch. And like Karen said, they've been around quite some time, so they will have ideas, and they'll help us with what they found works and what, you know, we might need to massage a little bit. The shortfall question, I wouldn't say there's necessarily shortfalls in the last master plan. There's things that it didn't touch on that had just come about since it was adopted. So my only critique of it would be, I don't think its public engagement process was as robust as it should be. But that's a tough nut to crack. And I think I already touched on the statutory issues and what might be added. And as we go through, based on public input, part of the review process with the consultant will be to go through the existing chapters with staff and to see, well, maybe we don't need to touch this one. I mean, this chapter might be in good shape. So we don't have to work on that. We'll focus on transportation, or we'll focus on, you know, some other chapter that really needs to be updated.
If I can add to that, in the last 24 months, we have literally done 5 or 6 plans, some of which cultural plan comes to mind, could literally be a chapter in whole or in part, bike ped,
Square master plan.
parking as a component of transportation. So we are handing them a lot of work, which is great, which I think could help shift the budget
get
to as
folded
much
in.
of the public engagement
Yep.
and the community organizing as possible.
Yep.
And I think the benefit of a UTL who has a regional and a national exposure is that they're always refining their own best practices of how to do a master plan. So we will undoubtedly benefit from the latest and greatest of what worked in Nashua, Chelsea, wherever else they might be, and that will benefit ours.
And the other thing, I've got more of a national and international experience base myself, so I look forward to talking about some of these things with UTL to see if we can get them excited to maybe try a few new things and try to get people more engaged. So that's the broad outline. I hope that helps a little bit. But
It does.
if folks have questions.
Questions of our speakers?
Do you see, so I love the focus on additional community engagement in the development. Do you see opportunities to make this more of a living document going forward by figuring out methods to sustain that ongoing community engagement? So it's not just, you know, something on a shelf that the city knows and uses, but that the public itself understands what's in the master plan and why the decisions we make are tied to it.
I think an online component will be part of that. Technically, it has to be formally adopted, so it can't be an ongoing living document in the sense that some things are, although it could have a comment section that would allow people to say, you know, I think you ought to take a look at this because of, you know, these 10 projects that happened in the South End or whatever, not in the South End, but, you know, someplace that need focus. So, good point. I'd like to see a way of keeping the people engaged in it, because it does, the planning board needs to refer to it all the time. And one of the things we're doing that's has yet to be enfolded into our zoning ordinance and the city charter is a new way of doing zoning amendments, where the planning board will actually, instead of the way it works right now, if, say, you propose a zoning amendment, or comes in by petition, or the council wants to have a zoning amendment, the planning board looks at it, has a public hearing, makes a recommendation up or down, goes back to the council has 3 meetings on it, and then the council votes on whether or not to adopt it. It's kind of burdensome, and people come to the planning board public hearing and wonder, why are we coming to a planning board public hearing? We're going to go to council and have a public hearing next month. What's that all about? So what many cities have done is charge the planning board with reviewing the technical aspects of the proposed amendment. So does it conform with the master plan is number one. That's really a planning board role, because the planning board is charged with creating it, keeping it updated, and should be able to tell council, again with staff's help. I say planning board, but in Portsmouth you don't do anything without the staff's assistance and engagement. So that will be a part of the new process with zoning amendments in the city, so that the council gets a technical document that lists through, does it conform with the studies that Karen just mentioned, because these are ongoing all the time. And few other boards are even aware of all these things, because they do come to the planning board. So, yeah, well, we're going to head in that regard.
I'll just pick up on that. I mean, our current master plan has a whole, implementation section that lists actions, responsible parties, the relevant department, time frame, some of these things I'm just looking at now, that have the time frames ongoing or within a certain amount of years. So that's kind of the thing that comes out of a lot of master plans, is this implementation table and timeline.
Yeah, I think I work with a lot of policy in my day job, and a lot of times folks use policy or requirements to either justify what they don't want to do or what they want somebody else to do, right? So how do we make this part of like Portsmouth's brand, maybe from a digital perspective, so that when you're going to look for information on the city, this becomes central? So it might just be more of a digital strategy than the master planning process itself.
And I can speak to that. 10 years ago, we didn't have a director of communications and
Yes.
community engagement, so this work could definitely plug into the digitization of what he wants to do. So this would be great.
And if you have ideas, please share them from your day job. That will help. Because again, this stuff, all this is evolving quickly, and we've had discussions already with Monty. He'll I'm sure have some fantastic input into this process with the public engagement and the ongoing engagement. So it's not, when the state made master plans a requirement about 50 years ago or so, a lot of communities adopted them and literally put them on the shelf. They just literally gathered dust. Nobody paid attention to it. We checked that box. Now we can do our zoning. We can do the other things and forget about it. That's not the process that we foresee.
Has Teal or the planning board talked about that new final product master plan being geared or recognizable for developers that are keying into that? So instead of coming in front of the planning board and then getting feedback that it's not in keeping with the master plan, they're saying, well, this is in keeping with master plan because I've researched that and this project should fit in this way. I've heard that at planning board meetings that I've attended, but it's kind of rare that happens.
A sophisticated developer will usually make those part of the record because they're setting it up for potential appeal, as Tom, I'm sure, would know. It's important to show that you've got the backing in the master plan, or you don't. If you're opposing a project and it's not in conformance to the master plan, that's a good place to point out a problem. You have to get down to the nitty-gritty in terms of what the regulations themselves say in terms of zoning and site plan and other things. But yes, this is very much a document developers will use.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. So you had mentioned that the public engagement workshops is a potential point of action for this group to help be involved. And do you see other points of influence or action that we can have? Or so, how do you see the Economic Development Commission supporting this most effectively?
Well, we've got to talk to UTIL again to get the details worked out. But as Tom and I talked about preliminarily, I think we're looking at this community engagement person, if UTIL can find them, or the community engagement firm, probably quite regular meetings with the planning board, I would think at least monthly, with check-ins. Now, those may or may not all be face-to-face. They may be via Zoom, but that's a budgetary question, so we'll figure that out. I would think we'll need at least quarterly check-ins with groups such as this. And then if individual members wanted to participate in other parts of it, that there are going to be opportunities for that. So,
We could build into the agenda an update at monthly meetings and incorporate somehow that
Yeah.
idea of a quarterly presence, either by UTIL or by some representative of the effort.
we could do that to give you, but if you wanted to, ideally, I'd like to see some of you participating in some of these meetings so that you could get a feel for how things are going and provide critique or support, or both.
Well, let me follow up on Jen's suggestion. So if you have some concern that some members of the planning board might not have the ability to give the time, would you consider a hybrid group or committee that would consist of the planning board members who do have the time, along with additionals, for instance, somebody from the EDC, who would be part of that regular ongoing process?
I think that's possible, and it's not my decision. So I think the idea, if some of you are interested, then the next steps would be for me to talk with the planning board members, talk with the consultants and staff, and try to create a workable group. We don't want to have a really tight 55-person committee trying to do things, so,
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I know once you start going to 2 meetings a month that it's going to be a strain on
Right.
some of your board members.
Right. No,
It's not like the regular planning board meetings are late.
they vary quite a bit.
Yeah. Other questions? So I have a couple of kind of follow-ups. Is the consultant going to do what I call sort of lead-up studies on issues or status of the community and things? So for instance, before the 2025 plan was adopted in 2015, there were some studies that were provided to the planning board. I'm not sure who did them, but they looked like they had the same graphics as the company that did the consultant on the master plan. So I'm wondering is that part of what you're asking the consultant to do this time around?
They're going to review all these plans that we've recently adopted. I mean, they're going to do their background research on trends, our existing plans. Yeah.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, the reason is so this is what was done relating to economic development as a lead-up last time around. I mean, it's a fairly comprehensive document, and I don't think it was done in-house. I think it was done, I'm just wondering what type of information that this group could provide whoever the decision makers are going to be to support particularly economic development issues.
The economic development is one of the optional chapters that I think is essential for the city of Portsmouth, and I think you'd probably agree. So if this group could have input for updating that would be extremely helpful.
Okay. We can do that. Has there been any thought about doing sort of a report card on how well or how much of the goals of the 2025 plan have been accomplished?
Good thought.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten to that level of conversation with them about how they're going to review and assess the current plan, but
I think that ties back to your first question. I think it's part of that.
Okay. And when you and I met, Rick, we talked about how the form of the plan on these types of efforts is often related to the, I don't want to say formula, but the plan that particular consultants have as a preferred model as they do this around the country. Is that going to be the case this time around? And does UTIL have a sort of a favorite outline of a plan?
I don't know if they have a favorite, but it ties back to the other question. I want it to be engaging, and I think it needs to be engaging. If it looks like, I don't know, some trigonometric report card, people aren't going to pay much attention to it or like it, other than me. I like trigonometry. But,
Or if it's just a cut and paste of the last one they did. We definitely want it to be tailored to us.
That's part of the conversation we look forward to having with UTL, to see what have they found in these other, because they're doing this all the time.
Yeah.
So what sort of engagement, what sort of new techniques? Just when we were working in Williston, Vermont, when COVID hit, and we had huge public meetings that were very well attended, and people were really engaged. You know, that's Vermont. And then COVID hit, and we couldn't have public meetings anymore. But they did something. They did things like word clouds on Zoom really quickly. People loved that because of an instantaneous feedback to see what people were thinking, and that's easy, and it's very, very helpful. So, not expensive, simple things like that get the people engaged, and it drew more people in. Hey, did you see what they did last night? That was really cool. You got to come to the next meeting. Bring your phone. You know, gather around the computer. So that sort of thing.
Okay, great. Other questions? You're not going to let him off the hook this, or he's...
What's the timeline of the plan? Like, when does it need to be completed?
There's no deadline. We're, as I said, we're expecting it to go into next year, and we'll just see how the workload goes and how it comes together. But it's not a 3-month process.
It's right. Yeah, probably 12 to 18-month process.
We have a municipal election coming up in November, and I know that's been a good opportunity to promote programs like the resident parking and things like that. So that could also be an opportunity for promotion of the master plan and input if we're ready for that at that point. It's purely focused on the municipal roles, so I think that's the right audience for this kind of work.
So outside this room and in your regular communications with the world, if you've been involved in or seen something that drew you in unusually, that, you know, wasn't like the same old thing that happened the last 4 or 5 years, let us know about that sort of thing, because that's the sort of thing I'd like to bring to UTIL's attention, discuss with them, and, you know, see if we can incorporate that as a part of this process.
If I may, 10 years ago, I don't think the city had a presence at the weekly farmers market, and we do now, and Beta Group took good advantage of that opportunity to sit at the city table and get input, not only from city residents, but people who came to our farmers market, and those are also our constituents. So,
And the
we
push
can-
polling capability we have now too.
Right.
So there's a lot we
Market
have.
Square Day. He's got a lot of feedback then.
Right, we have a service called Flash Vote. We can use that as part of this.
I have one other, I guess it's more of an observation than a question, but, you know, on this note of reviewing the current plan for progress, right, and what came out of it. The one observation I have is that there aren't a whole lot of things in the plan, the current plan, that are measurable. And so, I mean, I guess just to offer that for the upcoming plan, that otherwise it's just words on paper. If we don't have an actual bucket we know we're trying to fill, and how full it actually is, and what's left. So
Part of that is the difference between the master plan itself, which is a visioning document, and then the land use regulations that flow from it. So if, for example, the master plan speaks to, as it will, housing needs of a different type, different income levels and that sort of a thing, it should state what the existing conditions are. That would be data that would be in a master plan, and it would likely establish goals, but probably not with specificity in terms of a number of units. That would be something that would end up in a zoning regulation as a goal. And as the zoning ordinance itself gets modified, which is not part of the master plan contract, by the way. That would be a separate body of work. UTIL may do it, somebody else may do it, but it needs to be done, and I think UTIL will identify how it should be done. So the master plan and the land use regulations have to work like this. Now, some things, I'm trying to think of an example. There could be a statement in there about some things that could be more instantly quantifiable, like an inventory of city historic properties. Well, did you do it or didn't you do it? That sort of a thing. But other things are literally intended to be goals and to set the vision that then provide the framework to get the land use regulation in place.
So then, just a follow-up, does that mean that there potential exists that if economic development is added as a chapter for the upcoming master plan, that the potential more operational plan and metrics associated with it would fall to a group like this to do that more specific, detailed, measurable planning?
That could certainly work because again, getting the consultant and the planning board involved, this could be a subcommittee on the economic development chapter to work on that specifically. So that is definitely a possibility.
I'm still learning how all this works, so appreciate.
No worries. It's so fast evolving, we're all learning as well, because it's different. It's a different process.
But I also think that's a really great opportunity. We want to get the people who are just learning or haven't been jaded by the previous process or don't know anything about the
I didn't
previous
say I
process.
wasn't jaded. No.
All right. About this. But let's go find a bunch more of you to get engaged with this.
I'm working on it.
Well, in that regard, Andrew Simonis and I have met with the principal and the superintendent at the high school. We'd like to see some young people engaged. And there is a group that's based in Concord. I can't think of the name of it right now. I talked to the president, and she said that if you get high school students engaged, you get parents engaged. Because one of the criticisms when we first brought this up was, well, high school students don't vote. Why do you want them involved? But their parents do. And if the students are engaged, and based on the feedback I've gotten from the principal and superintendent, we think they'll get really engaged. Not as not the entire student body, but there are students who are very interested. And getting that youth and energy and non-jaded perspectives will be a very big benefit, I think, to this process. More work for us, that's fine.
Last call for questions. Any comments on what we've heard?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
We will definitely stay in touch.
Yes.
Okay. I will, just to follow up on this conversation, I will send around to everybody a copy of, it's on the city's website if you want to get it there. But in case you don't, I'll send you a copy of it, or you can send a link.
So you just printed that section off of the, you said that was a pre-report?
Yeah, it's dated in June of 2014. It says, prepared for inclusion in existing conditions report for the 2015 master plan.
You found it on the Planning and Sustainability website?
Actually,
If you point me in the right direction, I will send it out. I just don't know where that is.
if you go to the master plan
Oh,
section,
okay.
it's a sub-report under
Existing.
this says it's stated and it talks about the 2015 master plan, but we know that turned out to be the 2025 master plan.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so if you want to just send that link around.
Sure.
It's like what you have done on a more limited scale
Great.
last year.
Right.
I mean, it's just much more, comprehensive, loads of tables and stuff.
Yeah.
That's why it had to have been done by a consultant. I don't
Sure.
think.
Got it.
So just as sort of a going forward, I think the message that I got from my meeting with Rick and today really is that this is going to be a longer process than at least I envisioned. I thought the whole thing would be accomplished by the end of the year. That's not going to be the case. I think the planning board is probably going to be overwhelmed. I can remember, I was on the planning board back in the early 90s when we went through the master plan. I came on just as we were concluding the master planning process, and we spent the whole year redoing the zoning as a result of that. So I think they're going to be very receptive, and that's what I heard today of our input on economic development. And as he pointed out, the statute lists a whole series of categories, but only 2 of them are required, but it sounds like the chair is interested in having economic development as a whole category of the report. So I think there's going to be opportunities for us. As my email I sent out a couple weeks ago suggested, well, it may be that the idea of breaking up into 2s in order to find sections is not the best way to approach this if they're going to have a section specifically dealing with economic development. So I ask you to hold off on that concept at this point. I suspect, but when we get back together in April, that the consultant will have been identified, and we'll look at opportunities to communicate directly with that consultant and see how we can become part of that process. In the meantime, take a look at this preliminary report that was done in 2015 and think about ways that we can update it or where we will need to go in order to update it. It may be that's probably one of the more important things we can do for this process. I'll send out, or maybe, I don't know if you wouldn't be able to do sections of the 2005 report, would you?
The master plan?
Yeah.
It's online right now, right?
It is.
Yeah, but the whole plan is,
Yep.
but I'm trying to save people another 100-page document to read. So in 2005 master plan, the one before the 2025 plan, they had a section on economic development, and it was more robust than what we've seen in the 2025 plan. So if
Sean and I can definitely
Yeah,
follow up on that.
Okay.
I'll reach out to Monty, who
yeah.
help on all things digital.
Yeah, but you'll see that it's not a lot of words, but it has a lot more, goals, objectives, strategies, relating somewhat to Jen's comment about how you can have something that is measurable because you know what you're supposed to be doing, not just an aspiration. So,
Got it.
thoughts or comments on that approach?
Can you just restate the approach for clarity?
Okay, so what I'm doing is pivoting from the conversation we had in February about dividing up the subject areas from the 2025 plan in groups of 2 to figure out what the economic development impact would be related to those sections. That was based on having reviewed that plan and anticipated that would be the same approach. It sounds like the chairman is not going to take that approach, and the consultant's going to take a different approach. So I don't think we should be, I don't want us to get down a whole rabbit hole only to find out other people have done something different and it won't be useful. So right now, I hear the chair saying if we can assist in updating the pre-document, that would be very helpful for them. And then secondly, that he anticipates there'll be a section on economic development. And so I think that's the one that we have to think about focusing all our energy on. And so part of what we're going to send out is what it looked like when there was a separate section on economic development in the 2005 plan. that's what we should be thinking about, how we can do a better enhanced model of that approach.
Okay, so is there an ask of us, like a deliverable you want us to come to the next meeting with?
Yes, so I'd like you to look at this
Just look at it.
pre-plan from 2014 and come with what type, what we can do to either create or update that plan, and where we would have to go to get information if we don't have access to it. I don't know, maybe somebody has to take a look at the Census Bureau information or something like that. Because it does have a lot of data in it. So that we can present something. I'm not asking anybody to try to tackle that before next month, but to at least become familiar with that and to come with ideas of how we can approach that without saying, Sean, would you do all the work on this?
Can we also ask the consultant to identify the framework that they would want those inputs to be in?
Oh, sure, yeah, but we won't be able to do that before we get together. So
No.
it sounds like they're looking at the end of the month for the consultant to be under agreement. And so we'll be getting together right after that occurs. So I do anticipate that, I don't think we necessarily have the right to decide to call on the consultant and
Nope.
demand his time, but I'm sure that it'll be a fluid arrangement. Okay, any other thoughts about the master plan? Any new business, or?
Just add that I think the discussion so far has been a lot more collaborative than I recall either of the prior two being, despite intentions,
Yeah.
But thank you. Good time today for that.
No, yeah, I mean, I do recall in 2015, there were the citizen circles that were running on their own sort of parallel listening circles, I think that's right. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen this year, so,
We'll see. We'll keep you posted.
okay. All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.